Joining me now is the Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister, and before we get to all the politics, I'll say it, congratulations to your Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Well done, Premier.
Thank you very much. We're really proud to have ended that drought, Evan, and really excited about next year's season and hanging on to this cup too.
Yeah, well, but don't worry, you've clearly already in another match right now. Shots fired at Premier Legault says, look, Premier Pallister, save your money. Use it to keep the Winnipeg Jets star Dustin Byfuglien happy. What is your response to his diss back at you?
Well, I would disagree with your preamble in reference to the word nasty. I would say this is an honest exchange about an important issue. Human rights matter to Canadians. When we see rights eroded, we stand up and say something here in Manitoba, and I'd hope fellow Canadians, including Quebecers, would say the same. I think Quebec is too strong for a bill like this. I think Quebecers are too good for a bill like this, and I think that it is a danger and an erosion of human rights that we should all be concerned about.
When you guys meet face to face, are you going to lay into him about your concerns about Bill 21?
Well, I'm not at all disrespectful of Premier Legault. We agree on many, many things, and we'll be, I'm sure, having good discussions about a number of issues. On this, we have agreed to disagree, and Manitobans expect us to stand up for human rights. Canada never stands taller than when it does, and I believe that Canadians will defend the rights of others, even though they themselves may not be directly impacted. They understand that there are people in minority situations who are going to be very much disadvantaged by this kind of legislation, and I don't think that they want me to be quiet about it or anyone else. I would hope that Canadians would understand that saying, well, I want to have more trade with Quebec isn't as important as saying I want Quebecers to be free to exercise their freedoms, as we should all be free to do.
Do you think that the federal government, I mean, now you've stood out about this, do you believe the federal government, who said, we're leaving the option open whether or not we will challenge this law in court, do you think they should be a little more outspoken? Because they've called it legislative discrimination, do you think they ought to now just bite the bullet and challenge this in court?
Well, I would say that when people's rights are endangered, they don't need someone saying, I'll help you later, eventually in due course after the person has lost their rights. I would say they need help now, and that is why we're standing up and saying, by way of a unanimous resolution of the Manitoba Legislative Assembly, by way of this advertising effort, we're saying, frankly, we just don't believe this is healthy or good for Canada's reputation, for the minorities within Quebec, for Quebec itself, quite frankly.
You're meeting premiers tomorrow, but you got to send a message to the federal government. So I just want to be clear, when you say they shouldn't wait when their rights are removed, you're saying the government is being too timid on this. You would suggest, if you don't like this, don't delay, challenge this in court now. I want to make sure I'm reading your mail correctly here.
Clearly, on this issue, I would like the choice to be made by other elected officials, whether federally or provincially, to be that they express their views on the issue. I'm not prejudging what their views may be. Obviously, the Quebec Premier thinks differently than I. He says it's a popular measure. I think it's a dangerous measure. We agree to disagree. And I respect and like the Premier, but I do not like this legislative proposal. I do not think it is a good thing. And I would hope others would stand up and say what they think. If they think it's a great thing, say it, make your arguments, but you got to do better than Dustin Byfuglien if you're going to persuade anybody who's thinking about human rights.
Interesting. So that will be on the table tomorrow. What's your take on this Western Wexit? It's called Western Exit, or the Prairie Alienation. It's gained a lot of steam. Jason Kenney has been one of the chief voices talking about that. Do you believe that he has been dealing with that in a responsible manner or a reckless manner?
Oh, look, I have a lot of time for the grievances of Western Canadians. We have some of them here too, and certainly Premier Moe and Premier Kenney have been ardent and enthusiastic advocates for the concerns of their provinces, and I respect them for doing that. That I believe is important. And the federal government has a chance to respond. I know the appointment of Chrystia Freeland, for example, has been met, I think, with real optimism certainly by myself, and I would expect by the other premiers as well, who worked with her on trade files in the past. So, I think there's room for some hope and optimism here. But no, I would not describe the decisions or actions of my fellow premiers as reckless, except, of course, in the case of Bill 21 in Quebec, where I have to draw the line.
What's your take on Andrew Scheer? He's fighting for his political survival. You're a Conservative premier. Do you think he can and should continue as the Conservative leader, or does he need to make changes?
I think that the members of the Conservative Party have a decision to make. I think that the process is one that allows input from the grassroots in the Conservative Party, which I think is certainly healthy and good. I support that process. As far as Andrew's decisions, Andrew made the decision to enter public life out of a desire to serve. He has a focused desire to serve now, and you know, his choices are his choices. But I would say to Conservative supporters in the country, don't be your own worst enemy. If you've got some old rivalries to clear up, do it privately. Don't do it in front of a camera, because that isn't going to help the Conservative movement in the country at all, nor will it help the country, frankly. So I'd encourage Andrew Scheer and my fellow federal representatives, some of whom I've already encouraged personally, to stick to their knitting. They were hired to be the opposition. Do the job of being the opposition and focus on building your case when the next federal election comes around in whatever way you can. But don't start picking at each other. Circling the wagons and shooting in is never a good strategy.
Well, you know, you do speak French. People are looking around. Would Brian Pallister ever consider running as the leader of the Federal Conservative Party of Canada?
I've been there, done that. In the 1990s, I was the hopeless campaigner for unity among Conservative factions around the country, suffering injuries and 10-foot poles hitting me from both sides. You know, I'm in the job that I want, and the job Manitobans hired me to do, and I'm proud to do it, and I'm honored to do it.
All right, well, I got to leave it there for today. Premier Brian Pallister, who will be joining other premiers tomorrow. Great to have you back on the program.